Hi, everyone. Welcome. So great to see everyone here tonight for our winter meeting. I'm just going to go over fairly quickly the agenda and report on a recent project. So tonight we're going to cover a few different things. One, I'm going to talk about the What If survey results. We had members test out that survey in the fall, helped us tweak the design of that, and we were really excited about that. We're going to tell you about our transportation planning budget, which is open for comment right now. We want to get your feedback. We also have a report on post-pandemic trends that we're going to share. And we've been doing a really great project called Bikeable Baltimore Region. And we did a lot of community outreach on that. So we have Charlene Mingus, our planner, who's going to share with you about that. And then we're going to give you some highlights about what's coming up next in the next week or so. So, as I mentioned, we had this project called What If, and it's thinking about the future and thinking about different scenarios and what could happen. The website is at publicinput.com/whatif. It closed on December 15th. Next slide. And we had really good participation for this. I'm really excited to share that we had over 2,260 people view the project page and 659 people participated. That's a 29% participation rate, which is very, very high compared to what we usually get and what government folks usually get. So we're real excited about that. The survey generated over 1,100 comments. We had 382 folks said, hey, we want to continue to be involved, and so keep us in the loop. In order to reach folks, we did a social media advertising campaign. We sent out over 10,000 emails. And as you can see, there's a map of folks that we heard from throughout the region. So we're excited that we were able to reach people throughout the geographic region. Next slide. So what folks had to say, the top 3 priorities that people had were improving transportation, to address climate and the environment, focus on housing and land use. And then the goals that people were concerned about were safety, accessibility, and environmental responsibility. In terms of transportation improvements, they're interested in more transit service, improving biking and walking, and improving and sustaining the current system. And that reflects a lot of similar comments that we received on short-range transportation plan last year and other plans that we hear from folks about. So now I'm going to turn it over to Todd to talk about the planning budget.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Todd Lang here, Director of Transportation Planning at the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. I'm here to kind of go over what we do on an annual basis, which is approve our transportation planning budget. It has a federal name, which is kind of wonky. It's known as the Unified Planning Work Program, but that's what the requirements are of federal government. Is basically on an annual basis, we go through what we're planning on doing, both in terms of priorities for staff, but then also special projects that are identified at the regional level. So this planning budget is actually, the document is a 2-year document that goes from July 2025 to June 2027. But we're really only focused on the first of those 2 fiscal years, July 2025 to June of 2026. Once we figure out how much money we're actually going to have for that second fiscal year, we're going to come back next year and do another round of public input just to make sure things change over a year, and we want to make sure that we're able to take advantage of planning for the items that are important for the region. So this is money for both staff at BMC to meet all the federal requirements and plan in all the different areas that I'll talk about in a little bit, but then also things like focus areas, which I had mentioned are projects identified by our local jurisdictions and that come from the public. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think everyone who's in the Corps doesn't necessarily need to know exactly what the BRTB does. I think you already know that. The main job is, as a metropolitan planning organization, we plan and program federal transportation funding for the area that is encompassed by the city of Baltimore and then the surrounding counties here on the map. And every year we go through this budget process, really, and the main focus behind this is we're a resource for the region. We maintain data, we conduct studies, basically making sure also that the public is aware of how transportation dollars are being spent within the region. Okay, next. So these regional goals actually come from our last long-range transportation plan. We're going to be doing an update to that long-range transportation plan in 2 years. So we will be updating these regional goals. But these basically cover how we are trying to improve the access to opportunities within the region, and then also maintaining a safe and secure transportation system. Also, we are developing regional priorities. These need to be comprehensive because we have a very complex transportation system and a very complex metropolitan region. So we look at all kinds of things such as safety, air quality, freight, and congestion management. And again, the main documents that we put out are short and long-range transportation plans that identify where all federal transportation funding is being spent within the region. So this is a pretty complicated slide, but I'll talk about kind of the area up at the top with about the 12 to 13 different line items. This is where different BMC staff members are focusing their attention on. We have staff members that are focusing on things like air quality, emergency preparedness, monitoring the development in the region, and public participation. And we set aside funding for each one of these planning areas. All of these are basic requirements of the federal government for the federal funds that we receive. So our proposed total budget is about $10.8 million. 80% of that funding comes from the U.S. Department of Transportation through the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. And then some of the local match is provided both by the Maryland Department of Transportation and then through dues from our local jurisdictions. So beyond the staff funding that we need to do for the requirements, of receiving federal transportation funds in the region, the BRTB, or the Regional Transportation Board, also then defines projects on an annual basis, basically what we call focus areas, areas that they've seen other regions throughout the country have been working on, but then also local priorities and how we can start moving those forward. So here are a couple examples of them. The first one is we're calling assessing projects. We can tell you that right now at the General Assembly, working with the Maryland Department of Transportation, the state is looking at a new way to prioritize transportation improvements in the state of Maryland. That involves a scoring system. It involves doing feasibility studies of potential projects. So the local jurisdictions and the state thought that the Regional Transportation Board would be a good place to start defining some of these early priorities, start developing these feasibility studies so we can get a good idea of where we should be spending the money within the state. On an annual basis, we've been funding different segments of the Patapsco Regional Greenway. And this year, there is a bridge segment known as the Henrington Road Bridge, which is a segment up in Carroll County. It was identified in one of the earlier processes that just needs some additional planning efforts. And that's what is being proposed to start moving ahead or continue to move ahead on the Patapsco Regional Greenway. We're also looking at bicycle and pedestrian updates. Again, you're going to hear in a little bit from Charlene Mingus on the Bikeable Baltimore Region Project. Once we wrap this up, the local jurisdictions in the state have decided that it would be a good place to start encouraging our local jurisdictions to update their local bicycle and pedestrian plans to be compatible with the BBR project. Moving down to the lower left, on an annual basis, a number of years ago, we used to do what is known as a State of the Region report. And coming out of some of our public meetings earlier on this year, there was a suggestion that we should be doing more benchmarking of how our region is progressing in things like, bicycle funding and other types of areas, and compare ourselves to how other regions are doing throughout the country. So we're going to revive what we called the State of the Region report. This is where we compare the Baltimore region and how we're doing in the economy, transportation, education, and quality life to 20 other major metropolitan regions throughout the country. Moving forward, the household travel survey. Last time we did a major household travel survey in the Baltimore region in the state of Maryland was 2018, 2019. Of course, that was pre-pandemic. So we know that travel patterns have changed. The way we go about work, where we live have changed. So we're proposing to update that household travel survey, do 5,000 to 6,000 interviews throughout the region and the state of Maryland to make sure that we have a new baseline for how people travel throughout the region. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, we're in the early stages of updating the long-range transportation plan. Ultimately, that will be readopted in 2027, but there's a lot of steps along the way, including goals and strategies and candidate projects and scoring. So again, we've been setting aside funding for that project. This is just an example of some of the different focus areas. We encourage you to go into the document, actually kind of see what is being proposed, and then comment on it. We've wanted to kind of focus major efforts, around transportation safety, bicycle enhancements, and connected and automated vehicles. And what we'd like to do now is just ask the members who are here at the core to go into the chat box. And if you can think of areas that the BRTB should focus on for future planning efforts, please type those in. We'll take them back and we will, just like we do with most of our comments, kind of share them with both our technical committee and our regional transportation board. And even if we aren't able to fund it this year, it kind of goes into the discussion for next year's funding program. So I see some people have already started to add into the chat. That's great. Please continue to do that. And I will meanwhile be telling you how you can comment officially on the document through our normal channels. So again, we want to hear from you. The comment period is open till March 9th. You can fill out a survey at our public input page. That is publicinput.com/BRTB budget. You can also email to us. You can text. The email is brtbbudget26@publicinput.com. You can text a keyword BRTB budget 26 to the phone number 855-925-2801 to take our survey. You can also leave us a voicemail message at 855-925-2801, extension 11078. And you can also find us at Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn. So what will we do with your feedback? Again, we're going to document all of it. We're going to present it back to our technical committee members and then to our regional transportation board members. We're going to see how we might be able to incorporate your comments in this year's work program, or whether or not it's something we need to save up some additional money or do some additional scoping and hopefully bring it into next year's work program. So here's the timeline for the adoption of our transportation planning budget. Again, we did a lot of early work at our technical committee in late 2024. We then came out with this comment period that runs from February to March, which we're in right now. Then we're going to be reviewing all those comments and considering them in the March to April period. And there's going to be a vote on the finalized budget at the April elected official meeting. That is Friday, April 25th, 2025. And that gives us some time to work with both our federal partners and our local partners to make sure that we have agreements for all of these transportation funds. I see a lot of great suggestions coming in at the chat box, so please continue those. And after these presentations, make sure you also go to our formal public comment period. Okay, so any questions, please, you feel free to kind of raise your hand and we'll be able to kind of answer them verbally. Or if you want to do any comments or questions later on, we can certainly do that also. Thank you. And maybe I'll have Monica just kind of monitor and just see if there's anyone with their hand up, and let me know if there's any questions out there. Okay. Okay, well, thank you so much. And thank you for all of the suggestions in the chat box for our transportation planning work program, transportation planning budget. I'd like to move forward, and since I'm the next presenter, it's nice and easy for me just to kind of flip the slide. Wanted to kind of talk to you about one of the projects that came from our last transportation planning budget, known as post-pandemic trends. So as we had mentioned before, a lot of things have changed since the pandemic in terms of how we work, where we live, and where we shop. So one of the suggestions was to do some surveys, both of employers and employees, but then also look at a lot of market data to understand how real estate has changed, how commercial has changed, trying to understand kind of what is the new normal out there, how could things be trending in the near future. So this project actually is in 2 phases, and we've completed the first phase, which is the survey results, which we're going to present tonight. And then phase 2 comes in a little bit later, talking about changes in housing, commercial real estate, and things like vacancy rates. So this first phase, we did over 1,600 surveys of employees throughout the Baltimore region to really understand their commuter travel, work satisfaction, work from home trends, things like that. We did an address-based sample just to make sure that we had kind of a random sample of getting demographics throughout the entire region. This was done both by online and telephone. And then we reached out to different employers through a lot of our committees, through work at the GBC and other regional business associations to find out what business organizations are doing right now and how they're planning on changing their patterns in the upcoming years. Down at the bottom of this page, you can also find the link to the phase 1 report. It is about 140 pages long of different questions and answers. I'm not able to kind of go through all of those tonight. So if you're interested in this, please click on that link. It's at our community planning areas, demographic and socioeconomic forecasting page at baltometro.org. So we did 70 questions for these employees, these 1,600 employees that we did surveys for. We basically were looking at their job, what their industry was, basically talked about some of the satisfaction with their job, and what is the work culture that they're seeing out there right now, and especially in terms of flexibility. Then also tried to understand kind of what is their working from home and commuting patterns, both current and then in the pre-COVID period. Then we also looked and tried to get a feel from them as to what they're hearing in terms of what it'll look like in the future, whether or not they anticipate more or less remote work, and what are their main transportation goals. And then, as always, we did some demographic questions just to make sure that we understood kind of who is out there right now. Okay, let me flip. Then we went to the employers and we only asked them 20 questions, but they were fairly long questions. This is, again, description of their company, trying to understand the different industry types within the region and how they're adjusting based upon the post-pandemic trends, their size and location, just to make sure we understand, are these changes both urban, suburban, and or rural, and how are different companies in different atmospheres kind of working in these areas. Then talking about their workforce and saying, okay, what is the breakdown of in-person, remote, or hybrid in terms of work flexibility? And then looking again into the future and say, are you going to be doing more or less remote work? Basically, this is able to give us a good feel for, based upon the type of company, what we might be able to anticipate in the future and how we should try to adjust some of our transportation planning and programming. So here's an example of one of the questions that was out there, and basically it said, what do employees want out of their working environment? and what is leading them to do, what it's leading them to do. So we looked at what is their current in-person versus teleworking or remote work patterns and what they would ideally like to see. And what we've seen is that 64% of the workers that we surveyed are mostly in person, either all in person or mostly in person. But ideally, that number would shrink down to 39%. A lot more people would like to have at least an equal split or mostly remote or all remote work compared to the work that they do right now. That's not surprising, but it's good to at least understand what's happening right now and what would kind of be the ideal spot for a lot of the employees within the region. Then there's a lot of questions like you'll see right here in front of us. Which of the following would you like to see employers offer moving forward? And how would that impact your overall job satisfaction? And not surprisingly, a lot of people are looking for flexible work solutions, remote work options, but then also things like, pay transparency and employee recognition initiatives. And then how important is this to their overall job satisfaction? What are the areas that they like to see? They would obviously like to see, promoting accessibility, different types of improved work schedules, and amount of control over how, when, and where you do your work. Then there were questions about some of the limitations of the current work in terms of how much do you agree or don't agree with the different types of statements, basically saying how much flexibility do you have to be able to both do your work and keep your work life and personal life in balance. And then some, obviously, we still, a lot of people would like to have a lot more flexibility than they have right now. But then also some of the questions about in the last year, have you considered changing jobs or at least explored other potential jobs? And we have found, that roughly 28 to 30% of people have considered moving and changing jobs. And that some of that could be because they're looking for some of these things like more remote work or flexible work opportunities. Then we started looking at the employees and started saying, okay, in the next 6 months to a year, how do you see your company changing work from home plans? Most of the employers said that they're going to be staying roughly the same as they are, at least during the survey period, which was about a year ago now. But again, some are going to be looking to do more in-person work as we're starting to see some of the items like the federal government is doing right now. Then we have a lot of summary information, why do people work from home and what are their reasons that they are choosing these types of jobs. 81% of employees say congestion is the main reason that they'd like to work from home. Surprisingly, only 43% of employers think this is the #1 reason why employees would want some sort of telework program. But again, saving money, time with friends and family, all important items to both employees and then also in the eyes of employers. Then we're looking at how did people commute both in a pre-COVID period and then the current period. We can see that people drove less often, which we are seeing out there on the roads. People are driving fewer days per week than they did in the pre-COVID environment. We are also seeing lower amounts of rideshare programs. Surprisingly, walking was a little less, but again, that might be the overall trend of people being able to work remotely as opposed to even having to walk into where they work. And then public transportation did take a pretty big hit immediately post-COVID, but we are seeing some rebounds in some of the ridership, both at MTA and our locally operated transit systems. Then you'll see within the document, we did a lot of segmentation. Basically, we were able to identify different segments of the population, whether or not they were able to do more telework, whether or not their jobs required them to come in person, but then also segmentation to try to understand how we might be able to approach these different types of employees and try to make their work atmosphere a little bit better. So again, that's a quick summary of our first phase of our post-pandemic trends analysis. I'm certainly open to any questions right now, but we also have two other presentations and discussion items for the core members. So again, if you could let us know maybe in the chat box how your life has changed since the pre-pandemic areas. Oops, I thought we might have a slide on that. But then also, what you would like to see in terms of, your work atmosphere, whether or not you would really like to stay in person, have, that connection with your fellow employees, or whether or not you think you might be able to do your job more remotely or as well remotely as you're doing right now. So we have the question out there in the chat box. It'll be open for a while. And does anyone have any questions about the project, or we will be able to move on to the Bikeable Baltimore Region Project? Any questions right now? Okay.
Hi, this is Manoj. I have a quick question. What was the sample size of this one?
So again, we were able to do 1,600 employees in terms of the survey based upon the dollar amounts we had. And we had a good breakdown both geographically and then based upon different types of demographics. We hired a surveying firm to make sure that it was as representative of a sample as we could get with the available funding. We did wish that we had a few more businesses than we thought, but we think that there was some hesitation even with some businesses because a lot of them are looking kind of at the patterns that they have right now and trying to understand how they want to either stay the same or change moving forward.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, well, we got a hand raised. And Sue, question from you?
I did like that previous question, and I want to ask, were there any service workers who generally take transit in this particular survey?
Yes, so if you dive into the document, and it's 140 pages long, again, with 70 questions for the employees. So we were able to get down into some pretty good detail in terms of different types of jobs and which ones are more likely to be able to telework or use transit and how their patterns have changed over the years. So that's why we did what we called segmentation. So just like you're saying, if we looked at service workers, how did their life change versus people who are more office workers? And, how are things changing even now moving forward based upon what their employers are looking to do? So that's a great question. We wanted to make sure that we had a good cross-section and enough data to make sure that we dove down deep.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, listen, thank you so much. And what we're going to do now is we're going to turn the presentation over to Charlene, but we're going to leave those questions out there in the chat box. Again, have your work schedule changed, or have you changed the way that you shop since the pandemic? Meanwhile, I'm going to flip the slide and I'm going to turn this presentation over to Charlene Mingus to talk about the Bikeable Baltimore Region Project. Charlene?
Thank you, Todd. So my name is Charlene, and I'm the active transportation planner at BMC. I spoke to you earlier last year, kind of about where we were at in the project. So we wanted to give you an update as we finished our recent, our second comment period for the project. Next slide. So just a reminder, the vision for this Bikeable Baltimore Region Project is for the region to work together to create a bike network that expands opportunities for users of all ages and abilities, with a connected network that supports improved safety, mobility, equitable access to jobs, schools, housing, transit, parks, and other daily destinations. Next slide. Yep. And so this project it's slated for 1.5 years long. We started in December 2023. So we're near to the end, and you can see the purple dashed line there on the screen. That's where we're at so far. So we're moving along. Next slide. So why a regional bike network? While the Baltimore region has nearly 600 miles of bike lanes and paths, many of these are not connected. So that makes it harder for people to safely and easily go to the places they need to get to. So with this regional bike network, we want to focus on building connections to places that people shop, work, go to school, recreate at, and having more ways for people to get around, like biking can extend access to transit, help people stay active, reduce air pollution and emissions from cars, and boost the economy in the area. Next slide. So the regional bike network, we presented the proposed regional bike network, which is sort of the draft, from November 2024 to January of this year. So that proposed regional bike network doesn't create or plan any new bike lanes or paths of its own, but it uses the local plans from our jurisdictions who've gone through extensive public involvement processes to identify their planned network. We use those local plans to identify kind of important connections to elevate these. So these bike routes are comfortable and safe to bike on, as they're well separated from traffic, or they're on roads with low speed limits and little car traffic. We also identified gaps to help local jurisdictions identify potential connections in those areas. And we will be developing an implementation plan, including prioritization, a timeline, and cost estimates. Next slide. So the proposed regional bike network was identified initially using more kind of database criteria, quantitative. So we started by identifying comfortable and low stress bike lanes and paths that would improve key connections to these following areas. So places with many opportunities for short trips. So these could be areas with a lot of people, jobs, or nearby schools or public transit. We also looked at locations of vulnerable communities that may need more transportation options. We also looked at regional parks, recreation areas, green spaces, as well as public transportation stops, especially those with frequent service. Next slide. Then we took what we had gathered from there and put on the filter of experience and knowledge-based criteria or qualitative. So this was built based on what we heard from the public, as well as feedback from our local jurisdictions and the state. So some key feedback included the need for continuous, comfortable, and safe bike network separated from traffic, the importance of direct routes to the places people want to go, emphasis on closing gaps in the current network, and the desire to increase connections to neighboring regions, so those outside the Baltimore region. Next slide. So this is an image of the region, and then I kind of zoom in on this city of the proposed regional bike network. We are currently in the process of updating this. So this is kind of the initial draft we did, and we've taken the public feedback we received, and we're making updates that we haven't released yet as they're in the process. So in this map, there are kind of 3 different bikeways. Next slide works. So there's the regional bikeways. These kind of do that connections across the region from county to county or to the city. There are community bikeways, so those connect major centers within each jurisdiction. And then local bikeways, so that gets people, from their town, neighborhood, or low stress roads onto the network, or vice versa. As I mentioned, all the routes we identified were comfortable and safe to bike on, as they're separated from traffic. And next slide. In addition, we also identified less comfortable bikeways. So these are planned or existing bike lanes or paths that were rated as maybe not being as low stress or comfortable. So you've highlighted those, as well as some high stress bikeways that did not meet those low stress requirements, so that we could work with our local jurisdictions in the future to analyze and see if lower stress connections could be proposed for those areas. We also identified gaps in the network, and these are areas that could provide key connections, but there currently isn't any existing or planned bike lanes or paths occurring in those areas. Some of these elements are potentially a part of a project that Todd mentioned for the transportation budget. So we're really looking to work with our local jurisdictions to kind of update plans to kind of address these areas. Next step. So we just completed the presenting phase, as I mentioned, that ran from November 10th of last year to January 10th this year. We had an in-person meeting at the Baltimore Unity Hall and had 48 attendees. Really great discussion with the community. We also had a virtual meeting with 65 attendees. We had an online map and we received 601 map comments, 111 survey responses, and almost 6,000 project website views and 2,500 story map views. So next slide. So this is a map. This is the comment map with all the little green map location dots indicating where people left comments. So we had a pretty good spread of comments. Anne Arundel County was 77, Baltimore City with 252, Baltimore County 163, kind of expected for those to be the larger areas. And we did hear, from some of our more rural communities as well. So we are taking those comments right now and looking at updates we need to make to that proposed regional bike network to update it to the final plan network. So we wanted to thank our partners. We worked with MDOT, the City of Annapolis, Baltimore City, Anne Arundel, Baltimore, Carroll, Hartford, Howard, and Queen Anne's counties. Really helped us spread the word about the project as well. Yep, next slide. So they shared them through their newsletters, as you can see here. Next slide. And also with their partners like East Coast Greenway, Southwest Visions Foundation, and Bike Maryland shared about the project on social media, which really helped us get the word out. In next slide. And we also were featured in the Baltimore Banner and in WBAL News Radio. So that was great to get that press attention. I think it really drove some good traffic to the project. And we featured the project in our active transportation newsletter, in the Be More Involved newsletter, and then of course on our social media, where we highlighted especially some of the community interviews we did, where we went out into the community, talk to people who are walking, biking, asking them about what they like about biking now, what they think could be improved, whether or not they bike now or whether they'd like to in the future. Because we want to reach, people who maybe don't feel comfortable biking right now, but would like to if they had comfortable bike network to bike on. Next slide. Yep. So next steps. We're reviewing all the feedback we received. So this will help us update the regional bike network, as I mentioned, shape the implementation plan, and refine the performance measures, which we will use to track the progress as the network is built out. So the implementation plan will prioritize projects into 3 main categories. So priority gaps, which are 0 to 5 years, intermediate expansion, 5 to 10 years, and then long-term growth, 10+ years. We will also soon publish responses to the survey comments we've got, so we can hopefully provide some clarity with some questions that we received from the public. And then in June 2025, we will share the updated regional bike network with our implementation strategies, cost estimates, success measures, and more. So next slide, yeah. And Monica has put in the chat a couple of questions we would like to hear from you guys. What do you like about biking in the region right now? And then if you could do one thing to improve biking in the region, what would you do? Right. So we got a question if there's funding already in place for these bike projects. So some of the projects do have funding lined up, but this project isn't identifying funding exactly. It's more of a plan to help prioritize, so the local jurisdictions and the state and the region can help figure out which projects to elevate and pursue first. We are also including in the plan some recommendations and information about, funding strategies, ways to leverage federal funding and state funding so that we can make the dollars stretch further. And we're also encouraging, jurisdictional collaboration, which can make projects be more competitive as they pursue federal and state funding. I think that's the only question I have so far. I don't see any hands up. Well, thank you guys so much. And Monica dropped in the chat the website where you can see more information about this phase 2 of the project. And you can also look and see our earlier work.
We have one more question.
Yeah.
Gina's asking, what determines the location for a bike lane? And can you explain what low stress means again?
Yeah. So the location of planned bike lanes and paths are determined as our local jurisdictions. So let's say Anne Arundel County, they do their bicycle and pedestrian master plan update, I think every 5 years or so. We are taking all that work that they did, working within their communities and looking at what they pulled from that process. So it's coming from our local jurisdictions on how those planned facilities are identified. And then low stress. So on the project website and the story map, I think it'll give you a little more information, especially some visual information that can be helpful. But a low stress bikeway would be maybe a shared use path. So something, an asphalt bike path or walking path that's totally separated from traffic. It could be a side path, which is a path that's located along the roadway, but outside the road lanes. Could be a protected bike lane. So it's a bike lane with vertical separation. So you'll see either concrete or sometimes you'll see those flexi posts or flexi poles. It can also be roads where there's a low number of cars who travel on it and they tend to travel lower speeds. So we'd say like 25 miles per hour or less. Those are generally considered low stress. And this is actually based on kind of a national movement or methodology to look at, facilities and whether they're comfortable or not. It's based in that method. And also Maryland Department of Transportation completed a statewide level of traffic stress analysis. So we're building upon the work that that NDOT has done as well. Let's see, we had a few more questions. Do we have time to answer those or do we need to answer later?
I think unfortunately we do have to kind of move on to some of the other ones, but thank you everyone. We do appreciate that. Let's see, next section, we're moving on. I believe, Monica, you're going to do a little update, right?
That is correct. So I'm going to give some highlights of what's next for the Transportation Corps and what's next in terms of what we're working on. So, as we mentioned earlier, we did the what if survey where we're thinking about like, what is the future going to hold? Now we're looking at what are some of the needs, what are the needs of folks in the region? And especially what are the needs of folks who we don't normally reach, people who've maybe been disadvantaged for some time. What are the needs of folks with people with disabilities, people of color, that sort of thing. So we want to make sure that we're reaching all kinds of folks. So we're doing this project and we want to make sure that we're identifying what the needs of the region are before we go into our next long range transportation plan. So one, we wanted to let you know that in March, we're going to be launching the survey, but two, we wanted to ask for your help in helping us to test out the survey before we launch it. And we're looking to send out a draft survey for you to test as early as next week. And it would be a very short turnaround time as was before. So we want to give you a heads up, mark your calendar, save the date, something to look forward to for the activity for this month. And I also wanted to let folks know that we are going to be designing the Patapsco Regional Greenway Cherry Hill segment, and we are going to be launching phase 1 in March. And phase 1 is focused a lot on you know, getting to know the community and what the needs are, what the things are that folks would want in the trail in that area. We're looking to have a meeting at the end of March, I believe the 25th. So stay tuned for information on that. And definitely, we'd love your help spreading the word on these initiatives that we're doing. And that's all that I had. If folks have any questions or had any comments, wanted to ask us anything, we we are here.
And thank you for all the comments on both the transportation budget and the other two projects. We'll be going through those as we go through the rest of the comment period, and I see some interesting questions and ideas. Looks like we have some people responding, so thank you. Again, we also want to hear if there's any topics that you want to learn about as you're going through our public input page, or if you just see something on our website and interesting presentations, please let us know. We can certainly bring those here to the core, make sure you have time for individual presentations to this group, because we do value your feedback. Thank
you. Great. Well, this was yeah, okay. Yeah, Petronella will put a recording out of the meeting. It just needs to process it, and we'll send an email out soon that'll have a copy of the recording. We'll have a summary as well, and we'll also have the email that'll come out with the test survey. You're welcome. Thanks so much, everyone. We appreciate your time coming tonight. Thank you so much.
Everyone stay warm out there. Thank you.
Yes, stay warm.
Good evening. Bye, y'all.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.